Thanks, Brother Steve. And again, welcome to those all here and online in Zoom. This afternoon, we'll be continuing along with our seminar series, covering sections 13 through 16. Before we begin, we will start with the first verse of the Bible. Genesis 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This simple statement is foundation to everything else that we believe. If it's true, then life has meaning, purpose, and a direction. If it's false, then we are left with a universe that is empty of purpose, where life is just an accident, and our existence has no more significance than a grain of sand on the beach. Just as a painting points to a painter and a building points to a builder, so too the universe points to its creator. The Apostle Paul makes a point in Romans 1 verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his eternal powers and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made so that people are without excuse. This means that the evidence of design all around us is so abundant, so very clear that no one can reasonably deny it. Hebrews 3 verse 4 sums this up with plain logic. For every house is built by someone, the builder of all things is God. This afternoon, we're going to look at 4 powerful examples of design in creation taken from the Designwatch gallery. These give us windows into the creative wisdom of God. The topics that we'll be covering this afternoon are sections 13 through 16 from the Designwatch series. The first one being the case for the creator, the perfect copy, a cascade of hormones, and in kings' palaces. Each of these examples points beyond itself to the hand of a designer. Together, they give us the confidence that our faith is not blind, but grounded in reason, evidence, and the revelation of God through his word. Let's commence by looking at section 13, labelled the case for the creator. For a long time, people have said that science has done away with the need for God. We don't need a creator anymore. But the truth is very different. In fact, the more we discover, the more evidence points to design, to purpose, and to a creator behind it all. Books like Stephen Meyer's The Return of God hypothesis and Eric Matatax's Is Atheism Dead have helped bring this conversation right into the mainstream. When we look carefully at the discoveries over the last century, we realise something quite remarkable. Science hasn't buried God, it has brought him back to the centre stage. Let's go through 7 key reasons why. The universe had a beginning. For centuries, scientists believed that the universe was eternal. If it had always existed, you didn't need to ask how it began. But that changed in the early 20th century. Einstein's equations and Edward Hubble's observations revealed that the universe is expanding. And if you run the clock backwards, it must have had a starting point. That theory became known as the Big Bang. Now, when this idea first emerged, many scientists resisted it. Why? Because it sounded too much like Genesis 1 verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Einstein himself dismissed it for years, saying it sounded like Christian dogma. Later, he admitted that it was one of his biggest mistakes. So here we are in a fascinating position. A theory that once sounded very close to the Bible is now the mainstream scientific view. The universe had a beginning, and that forces a question, what caused it? Second point this afternoon, evolution isn't the whole story. Darwin's theory of evolution has shaped our culture more than any other scientific area. For many, it became the foundation of atheism. If life can arise and develop all by itself, then who needs God? But here's what most people don't know. The scientific world has never been unanimous about Darwin's theory. In fact, over the last 50 years, objections have only grown louder. The journal Nature published an article in 2014 saying, "Does evolution need a rethink?" Yes, urgently. 2 years later, the Royal Society in London, one of the world's most respected scientific bodies, hosted a conference called New Trends in Evolutionary Biology. And in 2022, The Guardian asked, "Do we need a new theory of evolution?" Now, that doesn't mean that biologists are rushing to embrace Genesis, but it does mean something important. The idea that Darwin's mechanism of random mutation and natural selection explains everything just doesn't hold up. Even scientists are admitting that it's inadequate. So evolution, far from closing the door on God, has left a gaping hole in our understanding of life. Number 3, another stunning discovery in the last century is what's called fine-tuning. Scientists have realized that the universe's physical laws, constants like gravity, nuclear forces, the speed of light, are all set exactly at the right values to make life possible. Change just one of these by the tiniest fraction, and no stars, no planets, no life. It's like walking into a room and finding dozens of dials all set to the perfect setting. You'd never say, "Wow, what luck." You'd say, "Someone has been adjusting the controls." Some atheists suggest the idea of the multiverse, that there are infinite universes and we just happen to be on a lucky one. But there's no evidence for that whatsoever. An astronomer, Fred Hoyle, once said, "A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests a super intellect has monkeyed with the physics." The mystery of life's origin. When Darwin proposed his theory, people thought that life was fairly simple, just blobs of protoplasm. But in the 1950s, the discovery of DNA changed everything. We now know that life runs on information, coded instructions like a computer program. And here's the problem. Information always comes from intelligence. To this day, no one has shown how life's code could arise by chance. The idea is that chemicals somehow wrote the software for the first cell is extremely unbelievable. Some scientists even speculate that life was seeded on Earth by aliens. But that just passes the problem further back. Who designed the aliens? The truth is, life's origin remains a mystery without a creator. Moving on to archaeology in the Bible. We'll step away from science for a moment and look at history. In the 19th century, critics dismissed much of the Bible as legend. The Hittites, for example, were thought to be mythical. Then archaeology uncovered their entire civilization. Skeptics doubted the existence of King David. Today, inscriptions confirm he was real. Countless other details, names, places, events have been validated by discoveries across the Middle East. Far from being disproved, the Bible's reliability has been strengthened by archaeology. It is no longer credible to dismiss it as mere folklore. Archaeology leads us straight into prophecy. Perhaps the most powerful evidence of all is prophecy. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Among them were ancient manuscripts of Isaiah, written about 200 BC, containing prophecies about the Jewish people, that they would be scattered, their land left desolate, and one day that they would return. 1 year later, in 1948, the State of Israel was declared. After nearly 2,000 years of exile, the Jewish people were back in their ancient homeland, exactly as the prophets foretold. Let's think about that for a second. A prophecy written over 2 millennia ago, preserved in scrolls hidden in clay jars, fulfilled in our own lifetime. Can we really dismiss that as coincidence? Or are we seeing the hand of God at work in history? Our last example under the case of creator is talking about atheism. Let's not ignore atheism and how it has been given absolute power. The 20th century saw the regimes of Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and others, regimes that explicitly rejected God. Together, they were responsible for the deaths of over 150 million people. And yet, many still say that religion is the problem. But history tells another story. Atheism, when embraced at a national level, produced some of the darker chapters of human history. David Belinsky summed it up well. What Hitler did not believe, and what Stalin did not believe, and what Mayo did not believe, was that God was watching what they were doing. So what do we make of all this? We can see that the universe had a beginning, that evolution cannot explain life's complexity, that the cosmos is finely tuned for our existence. Life's origin remains a mystery without intelligence. Archaeology confirms that the Bible is reliable. Prophecy has been fulfilled in modern history. And atheism's track record is catastrophic. If we put all this together, the case for the Creator becomes overwhelming. Science hasn't disproved God. If anything, it's pointing us back to Him. Moving on to number 14, which is labelled the perfect copy. If we think for a moment about copies, for thousands of years, the only way to make or copy something was to do it by hand. In the ancient world, if a king wanted to send out a decree to all his provinces, he needed an army of scribes. Each one sat there pressing letters into clay tablets, one after another. Later, Jewish scribes and medieval monks did the same thing with sacred texts, painstakingly writing them all out, sometimes taking months or even years just to produce a single copy. Then came printing, a great leap forward, but still costly and time-consuming. Eventually, we had typewriters, and with the help of carbon paper, you could make several copies at once. Hence the old phrase, carbon copy. Photography was another breakthrough, followed much later by fax machines, photocopiers, and digital printing. And today, of course, we even have 3D printers that can reproduce objects with great accuracy. But here's the thing. As advanced as all our technology has become, it still looks primitive when we compare it with the natural copying processes built into life itself. Biologists like to tell us that evolution explains everything. For example, one well-known biologist, Ken Miller, argues that the most complex molecular machines inside living cells, like the tiny motor that powers a bacterium's tail, are simply copying, modifying, and combining proteins that already existed. In other words, he says it's just mindless trial and error. But if we think of our own experience, is copying really that simple? Let's look at the Volkswagen Beetle for an example. The very first model was designed in 1938, and after more than 80 years of redesign, refinement, and intelligent planning, the final Beetle rolled off the production line in 2019. Each new version carried the DNA of the original, but none of these developments happened by accident. They required vision, creativity, and careful engineering. And it's the same with buildings. In my own field, taking an old structure, and transforming it into something new can be more demanding than starting from scratch. Copying, true accurate copying, is not mindless, it requires intelligence. Now consider our own bodies. Every one of us depends on a copying system of breathtaking sophistication. All the instructions that make you, are stored in your DNA. A chemical code written of just 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. Our DNA is like the ultimate reference library. But here's the catch. The books in this library never leave the building. So how does the information get used? It has to be copied. That's where RNA comes in. RNA acts like the researcher who enters the library, finds the right book, and makes a precise copy of the passage that's needed. Then it carries that copy out to the machines in the cell, which use the information to build proteins, the building blocks of life. Meanwhile, the DNA remains untouched, safely stored for future use. This happens billions of times every day inside each one of us. And remarkably, the system also includes its own repair and correction mechanisms. The error rate of all this, roughly 1 in a billion. That's accuracy no human printing press or 3D printer can match. Now let's pause and think about this. Could such a system really have just happened by chance? Evolution only works once life already exists, but DNA and the ability to copy it are needed before life can even begin. So where did it come from? Science has no answer. On this question, science is silent, but God's word is not silent. From clay tablets to typewriters, from 3D printers to DNA, the lesson is the same. Copying is never accidental. It always requires design. And if the copying process inside every cell of our bodies is so intricate and precise, surely that points to a designer far greater than ourselves. Number 15, a cascade of hormones. We'll start this next topic with something amazing. A single human cell divides into 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8, and it goes on. 40 weeks later, after 26 billion cells have formed, a new human being is ready to be born. That whole transformation is overseen by something remarkable: hormones. Now, what are hormones? They're often called chemical messengers. tiny proteins, but incredibly powerful. Even the smallest amounts can cause big changes. In fact, there are more than 50 known hormones in the body. They control growth, metabolism, reproduction, mood, all things absolutely essential for life. And they're produced by 8 major glands in the body, each with its own built-in feedback system so that levels never get too high or too low. Here's the next big question. Could Darwin's idea of random variation and natural selection really explain such a precise and complex system? Because the truth is, no hormones, no baby, no human race. Think of hormones like a lock and key system. Our bodies contain over 200 different types of specialized cells, but each hormone only affects certain ones. It's like this. If a cell has the right lock or receptor, the hormone fits like a key and activates it. If not, the hormone moves on until it finds the right match. That level of precision is hard enough for me to describe, let alone explain by evolution or chance. Now back to the baby. For a child to grow in the womb, there has to be a carefully ordered cascade of hormones. Each one acts at just the right time. Here's a simple overview. Hormone FSH gets the ovaries working and starts estrogen production. LH manages the menstrual cycle and releases the egg. HCG protects the embryo by stopping the mother's immune system from rejecting it. That's the hormone that pregnancy tests detect. Estrogen helps the uterus grow and triggers the baby's organs to form. Progesterone prepares the mother's body for labor and helps breast tissue grow. Relaxin loosens the mother's muscles, joints, and ligaments so the baby can be delivered. HPL prepares her breasts for feeding. Oxytocin drives the contractions during labor. And finally, prolactin ensures milk is ready to nourish the newborn baby. And even after birth, hormones keep working, restoring the mother's body so she's ready, if she wants to, go through that all again. Without a finely tuned cocktail of hormones, life would never make it to delivery. The scientist Marcos Eberlin summed it up perfectly. Without this fine-tuned cocktail of pregnancy hormones, there would be no newborns. Long before we knew the word hormone, the psalmist put it beautifully in Psalm 139. For you created my innermost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This is the point. Darwin never knew about hormones. The term itself wasn't even invented until 1905, more than 20 years after his death. This whole theory was built without any knowledge of these profound systems we now understand. And yet many still cling to this 19th century idea, even though they are powerless to explain such a complex design. But we know better. With all we've discovered, surely we, above all people, should echo what the psalmist says. We should recognize the awe and wonder of how we are made and worship God who designed and formed us. Our final section we'll be covering this afternoon is labelled in King's Palaces. So let's take a moment to marvel at something small but extraordinary. We'll be talking about the spider. King Solomon once said in Proverbs 30, verse 28, "The spider is in kings' palaces." He may have been speaking from experience, but today we can just see how true this is. There are over 34,000 species of spiders worldwide, each with their own distinctive web. Spiral orb webs, funnel webs, trapdoor spiders, cobwebs, the forms are endless. But what makes these webs truly remarkable is the spider's skill and the silk that it weaves. The spider produces its own raw material, a protein, from its glands in its abdomen, and turns this into silk threads using spinnerets. Not just one type of silk, but multiple grades, each designed for a specific purpose. Some threads are sticky to catch prey, others are strong to support the web structure, and a special cement is used at the junctions of the web to hold it all together. Without these, the web would collapse. Let's think about this. Could such an intricate system arise by accident? Could an evolutionary process with no goal or design produce silk stronger than steel, tougher than Kevlar, and flexible enough to stretch 300% without breaking? Could it teach a tiny spider to use this material with absolute precision, creating a web that is symmetrical, geometrically perfect, and ready to trap food? Humans have tried to imitate this design. In the 1970s, German engineer Frei Otto studied spider webs to create revolutionary tensile structures, including the Munich Olympic Stadium. Yet even the most brilliant human design falls short of the spider's natural engineering. Its silk alone is something we have not been able to reproduce. And the spider doesn't understand geometry, physics, or engineering. It simply applies the skills that are innate, encoded into its genetic makeup. But how does the spider avoid being stuck in its own creation? Its feet have a special non-stick coating, combined with tiny claws and springy hairs so that it can walk freely across the spiderweb. This is another miracle of design built right into the spider. The raw material, the tools to use it, and the skill to construct the web all had to exist together. A partially formed spinneret would be useless. Silk without the spider's skill would be useless. The precise knowledge of which silk to use for which purpose has all been passed down through generations. It all points to design, to foresight, and intelligence. Every modern translation of the Bible suggests Solomon was using the spider as a symbol for the natural world. His words remind us that observation of nature lays the foundation for science. Proverbs 1 verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." To understand creation, we must acknowledge that there is a creator. Paul echoed this when he warned in Timothy 1 verse 6, in 1 Timothy 6 verse 20, to avoid profane babbling and the absurdities of so-called knowledge. So next time we see a spider in the corner of a web, glistening in the morning sun, let's take a moment. Let's look closer and appreciate the design, the intelligence, and the wonder of the Creator reflected in even the smallest of his creatures. In conclusion, We've looked today at 4 powerful evidences of design. We've looked at the fine-tuning of the universe, showing that there is definitely a case for the creator. We've looked at information in DNA, the perfect copy. We've looked at the balance of hormones, cascade of life. We've looked at the treasures of nature found in kings' palaces. Each of these points us to the same conclusion. Creation is not an accident. It's the work of a designer. That designer is the God of the Bible, who made heaven and earth, who reveals himself in his word, and who calls us to share in his glory. Revelation 4, verse 11 sums it all up nicely. You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. Let's take courage from this evidence, not only to believe in God, but to trust him, to follow his Son, and to prepare for the day when the Creator will fill the whole earth with his glory. Thanks all.